What is good, all you cool cats and kittens? This is your Commissioner Tim back at you ahead of week 4 Monday Night Football, ahead of week 5 with a special episode. We are 4 weeks through the season. I know we haven't played Monday Night Football yet, but I think the records are going to stick as is right now. By the way, Kevin, I'm so sorry if Daniel Jones happens to go off for 50 plus points and all of this becomes moot. If that happens, the entire league has my permission to move the commissioner curse away from Brandon over to me for the rest of eternity. Also, gotta stay. I'm super jet lagged. Happy week 5, live from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. This is unfortunately the 5th time I'm recording the same damn video because the recording software that I was using was just bugging the hell out. So I've given up on it. I'm back to the trusted Zoom. This episode is a special one because we're our third way win into the season, and week 4 was quite something with a lot of upsets. Where standings are all over the place right now. Our tables look awesome. So I wanted to create a unique video looking at the playoff odds of the season to date through week 4. And we've got a really interesting standing with a ton of different playoff odds at large. Obviously, week 4 had some massive upsets, and I think the rest of the season trade activities are going to be forever changed as a result of the current standings. So we are now down to just one undefeated team and one winless team each. Obviously, I am lucky to be here at 4-0. I could just easily be as 2-2. But what's most interesting of all, though, in the standings is not who's at the top and who's at the bottom, but rather who's in the middle 5. We've got 2 of our expansion managers sitting in the middle column, tied 5th at 2-2, and leaving the preseason playoff favorites in Full Jerry and Huge Dicka currently on the outside in, looking at 1-3. What a massive win for Kevin Yip over the number 1 ranked power rank team in Brady Stirred Dynasty heading into week 4. And like I said, Kevin, if Daniel Jones happens to go off 50 points, I am so sorry for this commissioner curse ahead of time. But I said on Sleeper Chat that both of the expansion teams got the freebie win over 2 shots, no cup. But they both also pulled off amazing upsets against teams ranked higher. Obviously, Kevin against Ryan this week, but Brad beating Sergey in week 3. So we are officially through 4 weeks in the regular season, which means we have crossed the 30-day marker for the season to date. So I'm going to do some future forecasting. I'll have detailed analysis for the annual mid-season report, which I'll do this season as well, probably around week 8 through 10, somewhere there. But after the matchup results last week, I did some early looks at potential new playoff standings based on the first 4 weeks. And boy, are we in for one hell of a season. Also, keep in mind, week 5 will be in the same matchups for week 14, which is the last week before the playoffs. So this week will likely be the previews for an important seedings that will be determined in week 14. So I'm going to highlight these middle 5 teams because I think the current 4 and the bottom 1 are going to stay where they are. They're going to be out of the playoffs or in the playoffs, but there's a lot of potential action for the middle 5. So through the 4 weeks, I'm going to make the call and say that 7 wins is what it will take to get into the playoffs for this season without any tiebreakers. Separately, I think 11 wins is what it will take to get one of the top 2 seedings to get that playoff bye, the all-important bye week for the contenders. So all this video is about the road to 7 for these 5 teams I'm going to highlight in this video. So starting with expansion teams, who also happens to be tied 5th right now, and the top rated out of the middle 5 that I'm highlighting today, both Brad and Kevin, they both faced Eve twice before end of the regular season. This week, these 2 expansion teams face each other, which means one of them will emerge out of week 5 sitting at 3-2. So this road to 5 more wins club, obviously you have 2 wins, you need 5 to get to 7. I'm going to look at Brad and Kevin's remaining schedules. Barring any upsets within the games highlighted, both of these teams will need to get 4 more wins to make the playoffs, assuming the matchup against Eve is a win. And here's why the games are highlighted. So for the week 5 matchup, they face each other. But for Brad in week 6, he's going to be facing a struggling 4-putt who could be facing a must win with a chance he may be sitting 1-4 given a tough week 5 matchup. In week 9, he's going to be facing Full Jerry, who on paper is a much stronger team, but that week, John's going to not have the services of Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Javonte Williams, and Amon-Ra St. Brown due to all buys. And between weeks 10 to 14, you've got some tasty matchups, a repeat of the 4 weeks that we've had to date so far, of which Brad and Kevin both have finished 2-2. So, and it ends the season with this all-important week 14 matchup between Brad and Kevin, which I think is going to determine which of these two teams will make the playoffs. Over to Kevin. Starting week 6, he's going to be facing Sergey, who, again, on paper, is a better team than Kevin's. But in week 6, Sergey is not going to be able to have any of his Green Bay trio, as the Green Bay Packers are going to have their bye. So that means no Jordan Love, no Romeo Doubs, and no Christian Watson, as they're on their buys. And week 7, he's going to be facing Full Jerry, who could be facing a must-win or start tanking type of a week, as he's got Moncton Meerkats in week 5, and week 6, he's got Bills Mafia. So really, really tough slate. I'll talk more about John in a little bit. But assuming that in week 14, the last game before the playoffs, like I said, Kevin and Brad's going to face each other. If one of these expansion managers sweeps the other expansion team and picks up 2 wins between their 2 matchups, they probably only need to find 2 other wins to make the playoffs, assuming 7 wins is a mark, and if they pick up the freebie win against Two Shots No Cup. Unfortunately, due to the numbers, the sweep is likely what's going to be needed in order for one of these 2 teams to make it. So the week 5 winner, the victor, is going to have massive increase their playoff probabilities. These 2 teams have similar strength of schedule for the rest of the season as well. And I got both teams' ceilings as 7 wins. Obviously, only one of them, I believe, are going to be able to get there because they faced each other twice. But both of them has the potential to have as few as 3 wins for the season. So due to the scheduling and I think how the predictability works, I don't see both of the teams being able to get to 7 wins. But there is a scenario that neither teams currently, who are tied 5th, make the playoffs. And that's going to be if these 2 teams in week 5 and week 14 actually end up splitting their matchup. So hopefully that one of these teams are going to be able to get the sweep against the other teammate in the expansion brawl for the playoffs. But man, what a juicy storyline that we are past week 4, and here we are staring the eyes of one of the 2 expansion teams probably being able to make the playoffs, and 2 currently in the race for one of those seats as well. So that's the road to 5 more wins club, because they got 2-2. Let's move over into the 1 win club who needs 6 more to get into playoffs. So, going back before going into the 6 win club, if one of them make it out of these expansion managers, that means that there's only 1 more room available for like playoff seeding into the 6th seed. If neither make it, it means that we're going to have 2 in the 6 win club who are able to make it into playoffs. So starting with Jerry, Full Jerry, it's really tough and disappointing to see John sitting at 1-3 after 2 seasons of missing out on the playoffs due to injuries and just pure bad luck, especially with this season, him reloading for a run at the championship this year. He's sitting at 1-3 after another bad draw. He just as easily could be 3-2, 3-1, certainly 2-2 at minimum, because remember in week 3, he was the 3rd highest scoring team by a large margin. Unfortunately, he faced the league high of that week and then ended up with a critical loss on the books. But looking at his schedule, he's got Moncton Meerkats in week 5, and obviously a repeat in week 14. But starting with just week 5 here, it's a tough week, not only because he's going up against Moncton Meerkats, but John's going to be without the services Justin Herbert this coming week in week 5. Bills Mafia in week 6, again, tough matchup, and that could be a must-win. If he doesn't pull off the win against Moncton Meerkats, he's going to be staring 1-4 down the barrel. With the loss against Bills Mafia, you're looking at a 1-5. That's going to be incredibly difficult to come back and win. And in week 9, he's got huge Ditka here, but that's going to be him not having Goddard nor Devontae Smith. And I actually want to point out week 9 for John as well, 1 week ahead of Huge Dicka. That seems like a winnable week, but unfortunately that week, again, bad luck on the bye weeks and scheduling, he's not going to have Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Javonte Williams, or Amon-Ra St. Brown that week as well. And, that's going to be a really, really probably a must win for him to be able to take it, assuming that he starts off at least, 2-5 or 2-4 or 1-5. So, not only does John have the hardest strength of schedule overall, but he's, I think he's the only team within the playoff edges that faces Eve, Brad, and Kevin just once this season. But he's also got the worst luck in the remaining critical weeks over the next few weeks because of buys when he's up against must-win other playoff contenders or just tough teams when he's got a buy, and he likely needs a full roster in order for him to have a real legitimate chance at winning. That said, I think there's a potential range of 8 wins here for John, which represents 7-3 finish, or to as few as 4 wins, which represents 3-7. So 3-7 kind of seems a little demeaning, but if you think about the next 2 weeks and he loses those, which I don't think anyone would be thinking it wouldn't be the case, that would only mean that he needs to finish 3-5 to get to 4 wins, which is very disappointing. But 3-5 for any team in fantasy is a potential realm of possibility. So I really do think there's a legit chance that John's sitting 1-5 after week 6. And at that point, he would need to finish out 6-2 to get the 7 wins to get the playoffs. And that includes a tasty week 14 against Moncton Meerkats, who himself, Kyle, will likely be playing for one of the top 2 seeds come that week to get that playoff bye. So far, this is another disappointing season for John, where the difference of his record to his team's expected output on roster on paper is the biggest in the league. Getting at least 1 win over the next 2 weeks is going to be absolutely critical for John to massively increase his chances at making the playoffs or not. All right, moving over to Huge Dicka. Look at his schedule here. I've got a couple highlighted between Brad in week 6, Kevin week 8, and Full Jerry in week 10. Just going by sleeper projections for week 5, if Huge Dicka loses this week against Trust the Process, Travis will need to go 6-3 to finish out the season. Basically, that means a 10-win season pace. It's an incredibly tough schedule, especially in the last 2/3 of the regular season. I think the most important week for him, the most pivotal week, is going to be week 6 against Brad. In a week-to-week heads up through the first 4 weeks between those two teams' outputs, Travis is just 2-2 against Brad. So I think week 6 is an absolute must win for Travis to get in the playoffs. Losing in week 6 against Brad likely means that Brad becomes the new playoff favorite, and Travis getting locked out of the playoffs, as he'll be sitting at 1-5, needing to finish up the rest of the season at a 6-2. Again, same as John, representing an 11-win pace at that point. But I would rather bet that John's roster is more likely to set that up. I don't think Travis's roster is able to do an 11-win type of a pace output, even if it means just last 8 games of the season. So incredibly daunting rest of season schedule, especially with the struggling Joe Burrow. I think Travis's outlook is pretty binary, though. It's either Joe Burrow recovers and gets playing back to his normal self in the next 2 weeks. Otherwise, Travis will be in the toilet bowl come playoff time. Week 6 outcome for Travis, though, on a side note, will likely impact Full Jerry's chances at the playoffs the most. If Travis wins week 6 against Brad, week 10 between John and Travis becomes probably the most important matchup for playoff seeding for this entire season out of any manager league. If Travis loses this week, then it becomes probably less important for Full Jerry, given that there's going to be a gap there that John doesn't necessarily have to worry about. That said, I still got Travis being able to win 7 games max with the schedule that he has remaining, which means he's going to be able to make the playoffs, but he could win as few as 3 games for the season as well. So moving over to the last of the 5 here, Mr. Ambassador. Got a few games highlighted for him as well. We got Kevin in week 6, and then a gauntlet of a run against the other playoff teams in week 11, 12, and 13. So Sergey, I think, is the least likely to be able to make the playoffs out of the 5 I've highlighted today. It's largely due to the strength of his schedule over the next few important weeks compared to the rest of the managers, not necessarily a knock on his roster. I think Sergey can compete with any of the five here, but he's not going to be able to face the easier schedule in the earlier portion of the next 10 weeks or next 8 weeks or so. And I think there is a chance that because of the daunting task of the next 5 weeks at hand, there's going to be a lot of challenges for Sergey to probably drop into the record column, which is going to make it really, really tough for him to turn on the Jets and try to catch up and make the difference to get into 7 wins to get to the playoffs. That said, Sergey has the ability to really, really make or break the playoff hopes for the middle five managers. And it's because he faces three of the playoff hopefuls in the last 4 weeks of the regular season. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sergey leveraging that coming into week 12 trade deadline against those managers to potentially give them victories. That said, he could himself go on a run in the closing weeks of that season to sneak into the playoffs if should he wants to push for it as well. But that said, potential range of 6 wins for the season. If he was three, obviously short of playoff. But for me, if I'm a rebuilding manager, I would love to be in his position, especially with how Sergey likes to be active in trades and the fact that those three teams who are probably going to be the most desperate happen to be just wrapping around that week 12 trade deadline. I think that's going to be really, really tasty for action on Sergey's part. So, Sergey's extension over the next 2 seasons could be dangerous really, really quickly. But that said, all wrapping up, unfortunately with the scheduling, while there's no chance that both of the expansion managers make it, I actually think it is currently the most probable that one of the expansion teams make the playoffs. And that means that just one from the current 1-win team will get the other slot. I would actually put the odds at 55% likelihood that one of the expansion managers makes the playoffs and 45% chance that neither make the playoffs. I don't think there's a chance that both make it because of the scheduling. So with that in mind, obviously slim margins, but my call right now is I think Brad and John make the playoffs. But if Brad loses to Kevin this week, I think it's going to be full Jerry and huge Dicka for that 5th and 6th final playoff seed. But the margins are very, very tight. So as of where things stand currently ahead of Monday Night Football for week 4 and before any of the games I've played on week 5, I've got the odds of the teams making the 2 playoff spots as Brad at 60%, John at 55, Travis at 50, Kevin at 30, and Sergey at 5%. Like I said, post week 5, this could swing wildly on every side. So I loved how the playoff race is shaping up after 4 weeks. It's a wild one after having a preseason where there are unanimous picks across the board for who the 6 managers are going to be that makes the playoffs. I love that the race is happening. We've got 9 teams in the mix with 8 with a legit coin toss type of a chance to get into the playoffs. So this is going to be a battle. Week 5 is going to be wild. That does it for this early look at the playoffs heading into week 5. I'll try to get the video recap of week 4 out to you guys in the next couple of days. Enjoy Monday Night Football and see ya.